Hi, Year 12 students. We are here at part 5, the conclusion of Ransom by David Malouf. And this part may be considered in terms of its narrative structure to be like the falling action. We've had the climax of the story, so the rising action, building up the climax of the story, which is the ransom of the body. And we're coming to the resolution, the tying of all of the storylines together, the concluding resolution of the story. So the Somax and Priam are moving back through the barren wasteland that is the war zone of the Trojans and the Greeks, and they're moving back to Troy. And so there's the description of the weather. The sun is up, the fog crawls, the personification of this description, the lake of fog. The carter, Somax, leans forward and pulls the mules this way and that. And there's quite vivid descriptions of the barren wasteland. So as they pass, there's barrows of the dead. There's ghostly figures that materialize amongst them and then dissolve, which you can see again, the supernatural. There's old men and small children are out gathering kindling. So I noticed that young and old presented amongst the living, and we've got the juxtaposition of the ordinary life, the figures who are alive, along with the ghostly figures, the barrows of the dead from the war, the impact of the war. So we've got this, as they're moving back, we're seeing the impact of a larger scale of the Trojan War. And so the women are also presented, and we notice the impact on the women, and there is a description of the village, the remains of a village with charred stumps of an olive grove and roofless huts. So this village has been burnt, and the ragged infants and a little girl who's begging but doesn't even approach them. And so there's like some quite dramatic imagery here that emphasizes the impact of war. And so they go on, and in the middle of a desolate, dry stretch of bush, in the middle of nowhere that Somax can see, we stop, and Priam refuses help, which I was wondering, is it symbolic here that he wants to do this himself? And he lifts the cover from Hector's body and the face of his son. Somax sits there. He's in the distance. They can see the hills of Troy. The sun is rising so that shadows are developing, and behind him he hears the small sounds Priam is making. He's grieving, he's mourning, they're wordless sounds, but he understands them well enough, and he remembers the long night he spent with he and the boy's mother when they brought his eldest son home. Wordless but not silent. So there's this incredible grief and the shared human experience here. And he snuffles, also rubs his nose, and also remembers his own grief, perhaps, as he listens to Priam grieving. And he remarks that the adventure's nearly over, and he says to himself, I'll be back in my own life, and he feels joy at knowing that he'll see the little girl, his grandchild, his granddaughter, who's fully recovered, and he imagines seeing her. And then we have a shift here to this line here is a shift to Priam's point of view. Priam falls silent, and here he reaches his hand up to be helped. So where before he wanted to get down on his own and do his grieving, now he's accepting help. And after this moment of grief or turmoil, Priam's settled. The air is fresh and clear, perhaps symbolic too of the newness of this this action, and now this is triumph. But only a provisional triumph, of course, because the gods aren't to be trusted when they tilt the balance momentarily in your favor. So this action may have momentarily left us in the favor of Priam, but he says, what sort of triumph is it to be bringing home the body of a son? But he has done something for which he will be remembered for as long as such stories are told. He has a legacy. He stepped into a space that till now was uninhabited and found a way to fill it. He's done something new, okay? Something unprecedented. I like those quotes. You could use a space that was uninhabited, that he's now filled it. And not as he filled his role as king, because all he had to do then was just follow the rules, follow convention. And that was like, he uses a metaphor here. It was like slipping his arms into the sleeves of an empty garment and stand still, which is a passive action. Okay, that's his old role. Okay, and now every word has to be discovered anew, and he's done this, and now he is coming a man remade. So he is new. And I love this quote here. Look, he wants to shout, I am here, but the I is different. I come as a man of sorrow, bringing the body of my son for burial, but I also come as a hero of the deed that till now was never attempted. So I am new. I am remade. So he doesn't think of it as the beginning, not of something big that's grand, but it's a time for ordinary life to be resumed. But that's enough for him. So they launch back into the stream, the river Scamander, and the driver gets down to urge the mules again. He gets waist high into current, and there's no God this time. There's no need for a guide or for safe conduct. But Priam remembers the last time they went through this river, how he sat there with his robe bunched in his lap and let his feet soak, and how it cooled his feet. And he remembers the fishlings and how good the little griddle cakes had tasted, and of the young woman who had made them. Well favoured, he had a God's word for that, even if she did go limping. And this was warm in his memory, like a moment recalled from childhood, with a whole life lived between. That had happened just hours ago. And that whole life lived between, I guess there's been a lot of change that's happened, a lot of new things that has happened. So it's like a life. And now they're almost home. As they emerge, they can see Troy visible on its bluff. He thinks of those walls in the days of King Laomedon, his father, had been raised to music struck from the hands of a god, and he feels his homecoming to the state of exultant well-being in which he too is divinely led as music. And now we switch over to Achilles' point of view, and Achilles in his hut in the Greek camp is revisited by a lightness that is both new and a return. And I guess my comment that I've made here is this redemptive act that Priam takes upon himself actually relieves both the characters' pain. There's something new that both the characters needed. His heels glow. I've just got a question mark there because Achilles' heel, and that's actually how he dies. There might be something symbolic intended there. Who knows? And the instant warmth and the energy that fills him. The end, which is close now, seems to have been suspended. So he knows he's near to his death, and it is not death is coming. Now this here, page 212 to 213. Okay, even to actually 214, 212 to 214. This is a genuine flash forward, so not a vision. I don't think, I've got a question mark, is Achilles having a vision? I think it's a narrative flash forward. You can call it the literary term prolepsis. Okay, a flashback, by the way, has a literary term of an analepsis. So you could use both those literary terms in your analysis, in your essays. And so we've got a flash forward or a prolepsis of the death of Priam, which was hinted at, foreshadowed in the last section in part 4. But now we actually have an extended 3-page description of the death. So the bronze-haired avenger of his father's death. So this is Achilles' death. So we know that Achilles dies, and in revenge, Optimist comes to take that revenge on Troy. Child of time. So confusing. What does this mean? He already knows the last days of this story belong to him. So we're jumping to the last days of this story. So this is Optimist, the child of time, and he owns the end of this story. Priam story, perhaps. He's full of anticipation. He is ready to take revenge, where this old man, Priam, is standing dazed by the altar. So he bursts in, and he finds that it's not as he imagined, which is similar to Priam's story. When Priam bursts in on Achilles, it wasn't at his imagine either, because Priam has actually tripped as he is running in flight of the invading the invading Greeks. And remember that, the Trojan horse, wooden horse. Priam lies sprawled on the palace floor. He casts a terrified glance as the furious boy descends. He's got flame hair, so red hair. His body a furnace pouring out heat. And the youth himself can barely stand. He's so drunk with his slaughter, and a panicky fear assails him. Father, his soul whispers towards a figure he barely recalls. To be the son of the great Achilles is a burden. And certainly there are issues with their father-son relationship, the generational impact of vengeance, and the separation, abandonment, perhaps. There's a lot of things that we could analyse here. And all scrag and bones, the old man he has fallen upon is like a dog that has to be put down, and he refuses to go quietly. His palms are slippery with sweat. He's awkwardly a spraddle. He cries out like a child. This is ridiculous. And he repeats the cry over and over as he hacks and hacks and hacks. So what we notice here, so Priam is, instead of being there ready to fight back, he's actually already tripped over, and he's dead, not dead, he's lying on the floor ready basically to be killed, which takes away Neoptolemus's anticipation. It throws him a little bit, and Neoptolemus is, as he is ready to take this vengeance, he's drunk with slaughter, but he's also full of anticipation and nerves, perhaps, and emotion of his father-son issues, and he hacks and hacks. We can see that desire for vengeance and revenge there, and he's calling out to his father as he is committing this act of vengeance, this final murder. And back to 214, after he's hacked and hacked at the body, he thrusts the man from him and glances fearfully about. Notice the so we've got sentence fragments again here that are missing the subject of the sentence, that give the sense of urgency in the writing. He's hoping no one will see the botch he made of things. And he had a rush of exhilaration as he began this action, but it's leaked away. And in a swift reversal, it's replaced by a crushing disappointment. There's heart sickness, animal sadness, despondency. Nothing here has gone cleanly as he wished, all botched. And he's begs forgiveness to his father. And I just noticed that there's this repetition of the cycle of vengeance. But also, I think this is here to represent the fact that Priam's story, so this 3-page flash forward represents that even though Priam is the hero in some senses of this story, and he's brought his son's body back, that he also has a destiny and is destined to have a brutal end himself that is coming. I think maybe it's a bigger picture thing, that there's many lives intertwined, that things are impacting on each other. We see so many different ideas here. But then we are quickly jumped out of the prolepsis, but time has not yet reached that point. So that's the end of that 3-page. The fact that there's quite an inglorious death for Priam, and an unsatisfactory revenge for Neoptolemus. And now Priam, so in present tense, we're back on the way back to Troy. Priam raises his arm, he points at the city, and he points out Hecuba, his wife. The Carter nods, but he's in his own mind. And now we shift to the narrative perspective of Somax, who is thinking about finding something in the market for his granddaughter, and he's planning what to buy as a souvenir perhaps, and maybe something to Beauty, because this night and day has been so extraordinary, but he owes it to Beauty because she is beautiful. And he scratches and acknowledges Shock's ear as well. Shock, who cannot help that he is unremarkable and has no special charm. And now there is a sense of, well, for all that has happened, he will tell this story over the years. And there's a sense that the events of part 3 certainly is Somax's tale to tell. And here is in his story. So in his story, as he tells this story, this is future tense used here. So as he tells the story, Priam, Hecuba, Achilles, they are all, in the minds of his listeners, they're existing in their world. They're creatures of flesh and blood. But later on, thousands of years in the future, perhaps, later on, when Troy has just become a legend, a windswept hilltop, there'll be towers of rubble, citizens carried off. It will be the stuff of legend. So this is the power of story. Half folktale, half an old man's empty bragging. And even the memory will have grown dim by this generation. They've known nothing but chaos and lawlessness. 217. He has so many stories. He'll tell them to anyone who will share a drink with him. Notice again the future tense, will, indicating prolepsis again, another flash forward. He will tell them by the light of a single oil lamp and one of his many great-grandchildren. And those will sit and listen to these tales, will have heard every detail before and know every detail. The meeting in that tamarisk grove. So these are the details. The god Hermes. And he had managed to tempt the old king, who'd never heard of such a thing, to cool his feet in the running stream, and that he spent the night in the open yard in the Greek camp, was given meat to eat. His listeners do not believe him. They think it's an impossible story. He's a known liar. He's 100 years old and drinks too much. What he has to tell did happen, or so they say, but to someone else. Idias, the man was called, King Priam's herald. It's likely that such a figure, King's herald, would. Is it likely that this guy would have griddle cakes in his satchel? Do great kings dabble their feet in icy streams? This old fellow, Priam, like most storytellers, is a stealer of other men's tales, other men's lives. The whole of his life he is spent as a poor day labourer. He is, everyone knows, a carter, who long ago went out each morning to offer himself for hire in the marketplace. The most remarkable thing about him was that he was an owner of a little black mule, who is still remembered in this part of the country, and very much talked about. A charming creature, big-eyed and sleek, she bore the name of Beauty, and very appropriately too, it seems, which is not always the case. So his story is not believed, or rather it is believed, but it's not believed that he was actually the one who experienced it. It's somebody else's tale, which the ending really goes to emphasize the theme of story and the power of story and the power of narrative, and also destiny and legend. And that is the end of David Malouf's Ransom. I hope that's been really, really helpful for you as a form of summary, some analysis, but mostly just looking through our annotations together. Good luck with your SACs, with your assessment tasks, with your exams, everybody. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for sharing this journey with me.